the idea that I just presented, that we all have tightly wrapped concepts and very little flexibility within our minds, very little spaciousness. These are things that we should consider very carefully. These are things that are plaguing us constantly. And if we examine the basis of those very concepts, we will find that they are less than flimsy, that they really are puffballs. Because the very means by which we gather together our facts are unworkable and diluted. When we examine the Buddhist teachings, we find many philosophical and foundational ideas that, like a tapestry, are interwoven into one's practice. Among those are devotion, renunciation, generosity, pure view. Particularly in Vajrayana Buddhism, when one hears a teaching or does a practice, one should assume that all these thoughts are woven in, that all these philosophical ideas are woven in, and are part, actually, of one's training, of one's practice. And so it behooves us every now and then to look at these ideas and to try to distinguish among them which is being used at what time, but most of all to try to understand the logic behind them so that we can apply them faithfully and with confidence. One needs to know, therefore, why these ideas are being used and how they are being used, and of course, if they are being used. When it comes to an idea such as renunciation, one should understand that overall, renunciation is not the aim of this path. It is a method. Therefore, we shouldn't make renunciation a false god. Renunciation like grasping or renunciation like ice cream cones is phenomena. Just more phenomena. When we engage in renunciation, that is part of our continuum in relative existence. It is experienced through the five senses. All ideas about renunciation are understood due to the activity of the five senses. And in that, when we read about renunciation or we hear about renunciation, or we practice renunciation, we utilize these senses in order to understand and to bring into play what should be practiced. So renunciation then is a method. It is a technology and not a goal. However, we often leave behind or lack entirely an understanding as to what the goal really is. And so we make what I call false gods out of things. In the Buddhist teaching, the ultimate goal is to experience the primordial wisdom nature, to experience the awakened state, to experience that state which is beyond suffering, that the Buddha described very clearly when he said about himself simply, I am awake. To pacify those causes and conditions. And according to the Buddha, they are primarily concerned with desire, but to pacify those causes and conditions that bring about the fixation and rigid conceptualization that are the very building blocks of all suffering. To pacify those causes, and to awaken to the natural state, which is pure luminosity. which is an unconditional kind of awareness, or what we call a non-specific kind of awareness, which has been described as simply innate wakefulness. Non-specific, free of fixation, free of condition, spontaneously arising and naturally complete. This is the primordial wisdom state, and this is the ultimate goal. This is the true object of refuge. When we accept as our objects of refuge the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, these are external objects of refuge. Their meaning ultimately, when one thinks particularly about the Buddha, one understands that the meaning of the Buddha is not a man, but the meaning of the Buddha is that state of innate wakefulness that the Buddha achieved. The meaning of the Buddha is the primordial wisdom state. So that when one takes refuge in the objects of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, one takes refuge in that natural state, one takes refuge in the method by which to achieve the natural state, which is the Dharma, and one takes refuge in the Sangha, which is the stronghold and that which propagates those teachings so that they can expand in a world in which they otherwise might not. So one takes refuge ultimately then in one's own nature, that state of innate wakefulness. Yet, when we do not practice renunciation, what we are actually doing is instead taking refuge in the very kinds of things that I just demonstrated when I taught the children. We take refuge in the perceptions associated with the five senses. We take refuge in our own concepts that are built up on the impressions of the five senses. Let's examine for a moment that kind of experience. Let's use the experience that I just demonstrated using little Jonas and rubbing that piece of tissue across his nose when his eyes were closed and his ears were plugged up. He couldn't tell that it was a tissue, it felt like a cloth. Now, if I had rubbed it a little bit more, maybe he could have told that it was a tissue. Maybe he could have had that experience. But he could not have guessed at or felt with his nose what color the tissue was. So he would have to have opened his eyes for that. And he couldn't tell exactly how I was doing it and what the positioning of my hand was. He would have to have really moved himself back and really looked differently. Each of us has that kind of experience within the context of our lives. Of course, using a tissue rubbing across the nose is a very simple way of understanding it. But each of us has experiences that are incomplete, and yet we form judgments according to them. Haven't you noticed that? Have any of you learned the skill of good communication? Have any of you seen how incredibly botched up communication can get when you've got half an idea or part of the picture or not everyone's view or when you don't have both sides? That's a very easy example to use. But throughout the course of our lives, we are constantly taking in information through the five senses. And constantly, with machine gun action, or machine gun quickness, we are constantly belting out, if you will, ideas, concepts, according to the information that we are taking in, moment by moment by moment by moment. We can't even keep track of our ideas. That's what that white noise in your head is. What you're hearing is the computer whirring. And it happens so quickly that due to the idea that you develop moment by moment on a very rapid basis, and a very rigid basis, I might add, not only do you have this perception, which is kind of half-crocked, but then you develop an idea with rapid-fire succession according to that perception. And then not only that, but you are so smart that you begin to exaggerate and develop that concept that you made also with rapid-fire succession. So that it takes you just a fraction of a second, to have an incomplete perceptual experience, and just a fraction longer to form an idea because of it, and just a hair's breadth more than that to make up all kinds of scenarios due to what you've just experienced, which was wrong to begin with. And we have spent our entire lives doing that. And just as I told the children, that superstructure, that artificial structure that we build up constantly, doing that very kind of thing, we call personality. And we love personality. We make a religion about personality. Tashi, have you ever made a religion about personality? Come on, you guys, you know you have. You burn offerings at your personality. I mean, you just love it. It's just you, baby. And it's what makes you unique, and you can be special. And, well, you know, your whole life is about that, isn't it? Your whole life is about decorating it. It's true. We're always decorating it with ideas, with props. We've got to have props for our personality. Oh, I'm a fast girl, so I got to have a fast car. You know, kind of like that. We have all these props, and it's all about this personality that's like, where does it come from? It's a puffball. It's meaningless. It is based on nothing. Based on nothing. Yet, due to this habitual tendency, this scene that I'm describing is more our religion than anything else. And it just cracks me up when, if you'll excuse this colloquialism, it makes me laugh. When people come to me and they've obviously been decorating their personality for a very long time because it has all the props. And they'll say to me, when they look at the Buddha's teaching, which has a series of antidotes as to how to pacify this entire process, and very good antidotes, actually, I might add. Not that I need to add that. I mean, the Buddha is the Buddha after all. They will come up to me all decked out in their personality and all their props, and they will say, sniff, sniff, I don't want a religion. I'm a free thinker. Well, if you look at what they're doing, they are so completely enmeshed and entrapped in their fabrication that they are truly the most religious people on this earth. And it's the truth. It is. They just are completely religious. But their object of refuge is all the false gods that they've created. And ultimately, the bottom line, the experience that is at the core of their hope and fear, is the ego. So, we find ourselves in a very difficult situation. I really think that one of the best things that we can do for ourselves, just right straight off the bat, is to laugh at ourselves. Because we are really funny. And if you can learn to laugh at yourself, you've got something knocked right away. You need that space. You need that looseness. You need that flexibility. To be able to do that is a very precious and valuable tool. And we have to examine for ourselves, what is the supreme object of refuge? And what, on the other hand, have I been spending my life on? Like the demonstration I used with the children, Have you spent the entirety of your life cooking up an idea based on an erroneous foundational thought or perception? Yes, but not only one. Uncountable erroneous foundational thoughts. Uncountable. And so convoluted that there's simply no way to trace it down. For that reason, something like trying to pick out how you arrived at certain conclusions, like, oh, I'm insecure because my mother dropped me on my head when I was very young, and having a soft head, it was very painful. Or, oh, I have to drive a fast car because when I was a little girl, my daddy made me slow down when I was eating. You know, you can go back and pick those things out if you want to, but basically you're wasting your time, because what you're doing is giving yourself a wonderful, fertile opportunity to create just more of the same. You're just going to form some new ideas. So you'll substitute some old games, some new games for some old games. And you can't possibly pick these threads apart. This is a tapestry like you wouldn't believe. It is a tapestry actually of strong habitual tendency which began time out of mind, sometime long ago that we can't even imagine. We don't even have a name for it. We don't even have numbers to count it. This interwoven habitual tendency has been, if you will excuse my language, jerking us around for a long time. And we've been letting it happen. Now, all this seems very funny, but it isn't very funny if you think about it. It helps to laugh at it, but that's when you have to get serious. And the reason why this isn't very funny is that the very scenario that I described is what perpetuates the continuum of suffering. It's what perpetuates the continuum of the kind of experience through which suffering is all pervasive. The Buddha teaches us that in cyclic existence, which is the cycle of death and rebirth, the experience of sentient or feeling beings, suffering is all pervasive. Well, you're not suffering all the time. I mean, right now, you're not fixated on the idea of suffering, so you're not suffering. Some of you have just had some laughter. You're having a good time, sort of. But what's happening that you kind of forgot about is that you're getting older. And that moving closer to the time where your body will die. You will die. Moving closer to the time where you don't know how the continuum of your experience will continue. Moving closer to the next moment, which is a very doubtful moment, because the amazing thing about the experience of continuum is that it's constantly changing and it's unpredictable. No one can predict exactly how karma will ripen. So we are moving toward the unknown constantly. We are moving toward the process of aging, sickness, and death constantly. The taxes are coming up, and Monday morning traffic, and the loss of loved ones, and even the coming together of loved ones that always results in the separating of loved ones. This kind of experience is filled with suffering, because it is made up of the very building blocks of suffering. And according to the Buddha's teaching, we are involved in a process of fixation on erroneous exaggerations built on false suppositions, built on deluded perceptions. Because the real kicker, the bottom line, is that these five senses upon which we base so much faith, and I remember hearing students come to me again and again and again and saying, well, the Buddha taught that all these realms exist, but I can't see them, so I'm not going to believe him. Well, now there's some good thinking. Well, you can't see China either. How many of you have seen China? Maybe it doesn't exist. Just because somebody put it on the TV, they could have made that up. That's easy to fake. They do that in Hollywood. There's no such place. It could happen, right? I mean, that's like saying, that's the same. The camera can show us that China really exists. At some point, you have to believe something. But on the other hand, the Buddha told us that these realms exist. But actually, we are constantly believing only in what the five senses tell us. And the five senses actually, if you examine them, are merely extensions of our idea or concept of ego. If the consciousness, the movement, the continuum that we experience here were not based on the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, these five senses will not be as they are. They are the children or the offspring of this continuum experience. They come from the idea that self-nature is inherently real. The five senses are merely part of the continuum that we continue in. And we continue in the continuum because we believe in it. So what's a girl to do? Well, we have a couple of choices here. If we remain believing firmly and making burning candles to and making religions about the ego self and the belief in self-nature as being inherently real, and particularly the five senses, and the inner senses as well, which are based on the five senses, actually, believe it or not. I know we like to think we're real clairvoyant. If we continue to believe in those five senses as being inherently real, what we are doing is we are remaining, and here's the tragedy, fixated, simply fixated within the experience, and it's the mind that remains fixated within the experience that is conducive and has within it the building blocks, the very cause and effect relationships that bring about suffering. So the more that we remain fixated on the ego self, the more that we continue in that continuum, the more viable are our options, varied are our options, the more fertile is the ground from which all kinds of changeable and untrustworthy, actually, experience comes from. Now, according to the Buddha, you can engage in renunciation. And I point to the monks and nuns because they engage in renunciation according to the perspective of the Vinaya, and they do so very strictly. They remove themselves from certain kinds of experience in their lives. Back to the original thought. That's not the goal of the religion. That's not what we're doing here. So that should not be looked at as a sign of completion. That should be looked at as a sign of the correct and pure application of method. It isn't the only correct and pure application of method. One can actually apply the same method, but in a different way entirely as a layperson, by practicing within one's practice pure view. One should understand that the goal is to awaken to the uncontrived view, which is the pure, luminous, primordial wisdom nature, free of fixation, free of discrimination, that is to say, the activity that the five senses engage in, free, therefore, of conceptualization and exaggeration. That unconditional contrived, spontaneously complete, spacious nature. That is the goal. So simple and so difficult to know that we have never had one taste of it because we remain completely fixed in the experience of continuum. And even in our meditation, as we continue in our meditation trying to have that pure experience, so long as we consider it a pure experience, so long as we are having a meditation, we are continuing in the continuum. Therefore, one should apply the proper technology, the appropriate antidotes, in order to pacify all the causes and conditions that keep us entrapped within fixation. And doing so, spontaneously and naturally awaken to the primordial wisdom nature. But the technology is exacting. So many times students will say to me, well, do I have to give up this or do I have to give up that? Nothing that you have to give up, if you like that term. Nothing that you engage in is bad or different from any other phenomena. In pure view, chocolate is the same as shit, because in their nature they are the same. In our experience, however, chocolate and shit are very different. So we only eat chocolate. And that's why we practice this religion as we do. In its nature, renunciation and, how can I say this politely? Intense activity are in their nature the same. Neither is wrong, neither is right. But you look better consuming one than the other. It's very hard to understand. And within one's taking of the path, there's a great deal of flexibility. I practice as a layperson. I will not take ordination at this time. They practice as monks and nuns. Whatever one's method is, and one can practice either way, one should practice with pure view and should practice with the only object of refuge being that ultimate awakening. When we say, how should I practice? Should I be a true renunciate, or should I sort of be a lukewarm renunciate? Should I have one foot in and one foot out? How should I do that? You're still weighing phenomena. While you're asking a question like that, and if on that basis you become a true renunciate, you still haven't got the big picture. Because it isn't about what you be at all. It just really isn't about you, and that's the point. It's about understanding the ultimate object of refuge and freeing your mind from fixation in the experience of continuum, and thereby attaining the spaciousness and the precious awakening to the primordial wisdom nature. That is what the goal is about. And if what you heard me say was anything goes, no, you're wrong. You misheard me, or I misexpressed myself. There is an exacting technology. There is some flexibility in the method that you apply. And certainly there's a great deal of flexibility in your own enthusiasm. and how much you wish to accomplish. You can practice at whatever level you want to, but there is a way to get the result. The technology is exacting. It's very demanding. If one can achieve the same result merely through one's own inner mental activity, through one's own inner practice, without showing any outward signs, and that's possible, I suppose, then that's workable. But that inner activity has to be occurring. If, on the other hand, one needs to structure one's life according to the life of a true renunciate, in a visible way, then that should be done. The point that I'm trying to make is that we are constantly involved in a bed of our own making. We are constantly caught up in our private religion. We are all religious people. Whether we believe it or not, it's true of us. And the ones that deny it the loudest are often the ones that ought to be priests, and in fact are. Better to choose what works. Better to choose what brings the result. Better to define clearly what the object of refuge truly is and what the goal is. And according to the Buddha, there is one state that is the cessation of all suffering, and that state is enlightenment.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're always really glad to have you with us and to connect online with everyone. Sorry about the quality of the video in the beginning. It looks like that there was a problem in the video transfer. We'll see. We'll have to go back to the original and see what's going on. In any case, we're really glad to have shared it with you, and hope that you gain something from it. We do share these teachings on Wednesday evenings at 7:30 p.m., Sundays at 11, both on YouTube, where you are now. And in addition, on YouTube, Saturdays and Sunday mornings, we have at 10 a.m., one of our nuns give a live practice in the shamatha meditation. That is the beginning of the kind of stabilizing your mind. It comes from a book that Jetsunma did called Stabilizing the Mind. And you can get that at Amazon if you're interested. And you can come on, Saturdays or Sunday mornings, or go to YouTube and watch one of the previous ones. Let's see. We also offer silk ceremonies online on Zoom, and that's Mondays through Fridays at 5:30 p.m., Saturdays at Saturdays at noon and Sundays at 2. The silk is a food offering or a feast offering ceremony that brings about a tremendous amount of merit to help you, gain your footing on the path and in just about everything else you do. So join us if you're into Vajrayana practice, and if not, we welcome you to come by the temple and walk around outside and just check out the statues and the meditation features outside. The temple is currently on the inside closed. We had to close temporarily due to a COVID outbreak in the area, and we're hoping to open soon again, and then you'd be able to come into the prayer room and spend some time meditating. Meanwhile, we do offer all of these things online every week for everyone. Let's see, where am I? If you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, you can do that, having received a teaching and making a connection with her, should you wish. The PayPal location for her account is jetsumagift@gmail.com. That's in the chat, and you can check that out. You can check out our calendar, and for all the different practices we do. The calendar's on our website, tara.org, and you can go to the upper menu where it says Meditate, Pray, Study. Click down, and the first one down is the webcast and the calendar of teachings. When you click on an event on the calendar, it will show you where it's located, how to get there, what the codes are, and also give you a link to the practice that we're going to be doing, so that you can feel welcome and supported and join us when you have time and when you wish. Let's see. So other than that, there's always a lot going on here. Today it seems to be raining and a bit cold. I'm just going to say that out loud because, it could stop any minute, but I don't want anyone to get freezing or anything else. But we do invite you to come out because we are open outside, dawn to dusk, every day. COVID or not, just, stay masked if you need to, but inside definitely masked, N95s. That's where we're going here. But outside, depending on if you're with a group or you're just walking outside, please come and enjoy when you can. Anyway, hope you have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. We're not quite out of the woods. Would love to say we are, but I don't think that's the truth. Not quite. So we love you. Take care. We're here to support you, and see you next time.